Yeah.
Alright, let me skip Tracy's song. Nope, we'll skip all that. Alright, so I don't know how many weeks we've been doing this. I think this is like week 4 or something like that of this book right here, which is He Chose the Nails. And this week is called I Will Speak to You in Your Language. I don't know how all your relationships started out, those of you who are married. I know when you first decide that you're going to live together, that can be a very interesting adjustment for many of us, because it actually takes time to learn to read the signs of your spouse, to take note of the gestures that they give you, the nonverbal cues that you women are famous for. I'm picking on the women because I come from a guy's point of view here, and I just remember what it was like when Tracy and I first started living together, and what that was like. I think they're locked. That's not a good thing. Okay. Anyways, it was a very interesting time. It seems like when we first got together, we first moved in together, that's when all the arguments happened. We're not so much anymore, but back then when we're new and we're trying to adjust to each other, it was hard to adjust. Like, Tracy and I are two totally different people. Tracy, when there was an issue, and I think when we were doing a Bible group one time, she mentioned this, that if there's an issue, she wants to address it, and she wants to come right to me then and argue about it. And I will do a little bit of arguing, but then I get to a point where, all right, I'm going to walk away now, because I know if I keep this argument going, I'm going to say something stupid that I'm going to regret later on. So it took us a while to really start to figure each other's cues, I guess, or take notes of how we each acted in different situations. I soon realized, and what many guys will probably realize, that if your spouse says something like, you know what, we need to clean the apartment, or she says, I need to clean the apartment, that means you better start cleaning the apartment or the house or whatever it was. And I think so many of us men would probably fare so much better if we just learned to say from the beginning, well, what can I do to help? But we don't do that. I've also had to learn that when she becomes quiet, that doesn't mean she's praying. When she's quiet, there's problems. And I've also had to learn that when you say, well, what's the matter? She says nothing, then nothing never means nothing. There's something wrong. You better figure it out real quick. So it takes us a while, especially as men, because we're dense, to figure it out what you women are really trying to tell us, okay? And luckily for us, God is familiar with how dense we are. And that goes to both sexes, male and female. We're all a little dense. And He knows that so often we miss the signs that He gives us in our lives. So if you think about it, there's always been signs throughout the Bible. That we talked about, the rainbow in the sky was a sign of the covenant with God. Circumcision, we hear that, and us guys are like, ooh, circumcision. We know that identified God's chosen people in the Bible. He even talks about the stars portraying the size of descendants in the family. Communion was a sign of death, but baptism is a sign of spiritual birth. So there's so much of this signs that we use in the Bible, we continue to use nowadays. However, one of the biggest signs was actually found on the cross itself. And that's kind of why I showed you that first video today, the cross is the final word. is, believe it or not, one of the biggest signs in the Bible is right on the cross to us. And this is what the Bible tells us. Pilate had a notice prepared and fastened to the cross. It read, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Or some of you may have read, this is Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Many of the Jews read the sign, for the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city, and the sign was written in Aramaic, Latin, and Greek. The chief priest of the Jews protested to Pilate, "Do not write the King of the Jews, but that this man claimed to be King of the Jews." Pilate answered, "What I have written, I have written." So, here are the questions that come up with this is, why is the sign placed over the head of Jesus? Why does the wording of the sign trouble the Jews? Why does Pilate refuse to change it? Why are the words written in 3 different languages? And why is the sign, it's important enough, the sign is important enough to where it's mentioned in all 4 Gospels? So why? And this is the question I ask you. Is it possible that this simple piece of wood is really a picture of God's devotion to all of us? Is it possible the sign actually reveals 2 truths about God's desire to reach the world? And I'm going to give you the 2 truths that I think the sign gives us, okay? And the first thing I think the sign tells us is that there is no person that God is unwilling to use to spread the message of Jesus, to spread the message of the Gospels, to let us know that Jesus is King. And I mean, if you could think about this and just wrap your brain around this, here we are. Jesus is on the cross, and there's a criminal on each side of him, and one of those criminals, I mean, all 3 of them, real, but the one criminal, moments from death, an agonizing pain, bleeding, could have said anything at that point in time, but what does he end up saying? He ends up saying this. Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." Now, he doesn't say, "Jesus, save me. Do something to save me," right? Get me off of this cross. I can't handle this, right? Sorry. My pocket's hitting buttons on my phone. I don't understand, she says. He doesn't say save me or anything like that. He doesn't beg for mercy. "Oh, Jesus, have mercy on me. Get me down from here," you know. He doesn't say any of that stuff. But his appeal that he gives, Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom. The appeal that he gives is that of a servant to a king, right? And he even refers to Jesus' kingdom there, right? He says, remember me when you come into your kingdom. So he's got that. And maybe it's because he had heard Jesus speak in the past. Maybe he was, familiar with Jesus and what his claims were, and so maybe that's why he said what he said. Or is it possible that the reason he says this is because he turns his head to the side and sees the sign that was written? Because at the top of the cross was written, "This is the King of the Jews." So we hear about that. We hear about the conversation with Pilate and them writing, "This is the King of the Jews." And then four verses later, we're told about this conversation between Jesus and the thief. And him saying, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." So is it possible that this thief read the sign? Because let's face it, the thief knows that he's in a mess. I mean, a royal mess, right? This isn't going to go well for him. He's in a royal mess. So what does he do? He reads a royal proclamation on the sign. And if that is true, if he read that sign that says, "This is the King of the Jews," if that's true, then that sign actually serves as the first tool used to proclaim the message of the cross. That's pretty impressive if you think about it. Because since that day, we have the sign that started it all, possibly. Since that day, we've had stadium tours to spread the message of Christ. We've had printing presses so that we can all get our hands on a Bible. We have all sorts of books out there that we're able to get our hands on. We've got radio out there that everybody can hear, Family Life Network. We got all these videos and stuff we can watch here, and all these things like Newsboys and so many other different groups that we can listen to. There's just so many things that helps us spread the message of the gospel today, but a crude wooden sign preceded all of it. And because of a sign that day, a simple sign, a soul was saved. We know the thief dies, but can you imagine after dying what must have happened when he got to heaven? Can you imagine the conversation between a thief and an angel? You don't have to imagine it, because I'm going to read it to you right out of the book. So, an angel and a thief have a conversation. Angel, have a seat. Now tell me, Mr. Thief, how did you come to be saved? Thief says, I just asked Jesus to remember me in his kingdom. Sure didn't expect it to happen so quickly. The angel says, I see. And just how did you know he was a king? Thief, there was a sign over his head, Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. I believed the sign and, well, here I am. Angel believed a sign as he writes it down. The thief says, that's right, the sign was put there by some guy named John. Angel says, I don't think so. Thief, maybe it was that other follower, Peter. Nope, wasn't Peter. Then which apostle did it? The angel said, well, if you really want to know, the sign was Pilate's idea. No kidding. Pilate? Huh. And the angel says, don't be surprised. God used a bush to call Moses and a donkey to convict a prophet to get Jonah's attention. God used a big fish. There is no person he won't use. Well, that about wraps it up. Take this to the next window. Just follow the signs. Pilate never in a million years meant to spread the gospel. That's not his intention. He didn't mean it, but he did. It was supposed to be like this. He put the sign up there, and it was supposed to be like, we are Rome, and this is what happens when you mess with Rome. Here is your Jewish king. See, even your Jewish king is crushed beneath Rome. You mess with Rome, this is what happened. The sign was meant to threaten and mock the Jews. But God had other ideas with that sign. Pilate became God's instrument in spreading the gospel. That's why we can say that God can use anybody. C.S. Lewis, probably a lot of you have heard of C.S. Lewis. He came to Christ in his adult years, and from that day, he helped millions of people come to Christ over the years. However, his background is kind of interesting. He was working with a man named T.D. Weldon, And both of them were agnostics. Okay? But Weldon was cynical. He was a cynical unbeliever. And Weldon made a comment one day that would change C.S. Lewis's life. This is what Weldon said. He said, that stuff of the dying God, it almost looks as if it really happened. It almost looked as if it really happened. And that statement made C.S. Lewis start to question everything that day. He started to wonder if maybe Jesus actually might be who he claimed to be. So if you think about it, a thief is led to Christ by one who rejected Christ, and a scholar is led to Christ by one who didn't believe in Christ. There is no person that God won't use. Me, you, or anybody. So that was the first thing. Number two is there is no language God will not speak. Everybody who passed by that cross could read the sign that was put there. They all would have read in their lives. They were all from the area that would have read. They either would have been Hebrew, Latin, or Greek, and it was written in all those languages. So it was there for them. So God had a message for all the people. Christ is King. And the message was the same, no matter who you were, what language you spoke. And that's why it was written in all different languages. Jesus was King of all people, so the message had to be put in the tongue of all people. So here's the question for each of us to ask ourselves today. What language is God speaking to you? Because he speaks to you in whatever language you're going to understand. Sometimes he speaks to us in the language of abundance, and this one's our favorite one to be spoken to in. And you can ask yourself some questions. Is your stomach full? Are your bills paid? Do you got a little extra jingle in your pocket? Could it be that you have much so that you can give much to people in need? God can give you more blessings than you're ever going to know, than what you're ever going to need. But that doesn't mean that he gives us these blessings just to take and keep for ourselves. That's not what he wants at all. Not sure. And God is able to cause all grace to abound to you, so that in everything at all times, because you have enough of everything, you may overflow in every good work. Yes, you may have been given abundance, but that doesn't mean you keep it to yourself. Good works is what he wants from us. Is he speaking to you in a voice of want? Where you want something? Maybe there's a time, or there's been a time, maybe it is a time, when you just feel like, you know what, we're not going to make it. We're not sure how we're going to get paycheck to paycheck. We're not sure how this bill's going to get paid, how something's going to happen. I remember when Tracy and I were first starting out together, we both had terrible jobs, terrible paying jobs. And just remember that electric bill coming and not knowing how we were going to pay it. It just hanging over your head the whole time. How are we going to pay this? How are we going to pay this? And I remember we went to a Bible study one night, and somebody at the Bible study, I mean, we didn't tell anybody any of these issues or anything, but somebody just came to us and gave us an envelope and said, this is what me and my husband like to do once in a while. We like to give some gifts, and we'd like to give you and your wife a gift because of everything you guys do for the church. And we opened up that envelope, and it was like the amount of the electric bill was there. It's just like, sometimes it's just, when things seem rough, it's just God saying, hey, remember me? I'm involved in your life. I'll take care of you. Even though it seems like things are bad, somehow we're all still here, aren't we? Because God speaks the language of want to us. He also speaks the language of affliction sometimes. If you've ever been in a hospital, if you've ever been at the hall by someone's bed when they're sick, nothing seems to turn our ears towards heaven like a frail body. He speaks all languages, and that includes your language, whatever language it is that you are speaking. He tells us in the Bible that he will teach us the way that we should go. We are urged to receive instructions from his mouth. And I know some people say, well, God doesn't speak to me. And I think that sometimes that just means we're not listening. And you'll notice sometimes the further you run away from God, the harder it is to hear him. So perhaps if you're not hearing the voice of God, it's because you traveled too far away. And you need to come back to God. And the closer you get, the easier it'll be to hear him speaking to you. The Lord tells the secrets to those who respect him. True. And it is really amazing if you think of the way that God learns to speak our language and how others have learned to speak your language at times. Probably most of you, maybe not all of you, know that Tracy and I often have Sarah Beth with us. I think she's going to be here next week. Sarah Beth is deaf. And Tracy had a boyfriend, I believe the story is, when she was in high school, and the boyfriend was deaf, and for whatever reason, sign language just came really easy to Tracy. But she was just able to hear or see how to do a sign one time, and she would remember it after that. Well, so her and Sarah Beth ended up being matched up, and Tracy was Sarah Beth's personal interpreter for years. And that's why, you know, she's comes to our house all the time and is like pretty much like, you know, a second daughter that we have. Well, about a year ago we went to a fair and we took Sarah Beth with us, and Sarah Beth was going to take Tabitha and they were going to get on some ride that would make me sick, which is pretty much all rides, by the way, just so you know. So they go up to get on, and me and Tracy are standing there. They go up to get on this ride, and they get on this ride, and it's amazing. They get into this, I don't know what it was, something enclosed, and we're looking at them. They're right there. And Sarah Beth had actually gotten onto a ride with two other girls that were deaf, that were from a deaf school. So now we have three girls who, out of nowhere, I don't know any sign language, so I'll just do this, okay? So they're signing to each other. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. What are the chances that she would have gotten on that one car with the two deaf girls? Well, then I see the guy working the ride coming, and he steps up, and I'm like, uh-oh. He's going to say something. He says something to them, and I'm like, well, this is going to be good, because they're going to, and he's going to be like, right? So they do their, and instead of doing, he goes, and he speaks to them in their language. I'm like, wow. That's kind of just, what are the chances that Tracy and Sarah Beth would be there who would speak the language? And then they would get on a ride with two other girls who spoke sign language. And then what are the chances that this one guy would just come over and speak their language to them? It's like, I don't know what the chances are, but I just thought that was so cool. And I think God is the same way. He learns to to speak whatever language it's going to take to get through to you. This morning, getting ready to leave the house, packing up the computer and everything, and Tabitha's there, and me and Tabitha will start to pick on each other sometimes, and I will tell her I'm going to eat her face and stuff like that, and she'll yell at me. And so this morning, she's coming down the stairs, and I go, Tabitha, I'm going to beat you. She goes, I don't think so. Like, I mean, this is the girl who a couple years ago we couldn't even have a conversation with. I don't think so. And she's like, you never had before. And I was like, I'm just like, so what makes you think you won't today? Because you never have. And it's just like having this like grown-up conversation with her. And as parents, we learn, I think, at a young age how to communicate with our kids. And as they get older, our communication changes, and here I am having this I don't think so like attitude. I don't think so. You know, and you never had before, BB. So as parents and as a father, I've learned to speak the language of my children. And your father has learned to speak your language as well. So that's the question. Is he speaking to you? Do you hear the voice of God? And if you don't hear, you might be too far away. It's time to come closer. Because I tell you, it is one thing as a new couple together, a new husband and wife together. It's one thing to miss a message that your wife gives you about maybe going and cleaning up the garage. It's something entirely different to miss the message that God is trying to give you about your destiny. So let him speak to you. Open up your ears. Because chances are, if you're here today and you've accepted him into your life, chances are he's talking. And if you're not hearing it, you're probably just not listening. Because God will speak to you in your language. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, although it was a rough start to the service, with Tracy not being here, being locked out of her car, and just a rough morning in a few different capacities, we're just thankful that those who got here managed to get here today. And I just ask, God, that you bless everybody who's here today. And God, I just pray that we remember to quiet down sometimes. Sometimes that means that we have to shut our own mouths. I pray that we just take the time to listen, to try to pick up on whatever it is that you're telling us to do in our lives, whether it be to help somebody who's in need that we can help, whether it is that perhaps we have something we can give to somebody somewhere, whether it is that somebody needs to hear the message, whether somebody needs to know that Jesus is the King, that we pray that you allow us to be your instruments, your chosen instruments. We know that you will use anybody, and we gladly take on that task. God, we just ask that you be with us today. You be with us every day, and be a constant in our lives. And God, we promise that we will try to remember to take the time to let you into our lives. We ask all these things in Jesus Christ's name. Amen.